a lot of great content out there on Alan Watts, so go out, check it out. He recorded a lot of his lectures. So he's not like some of the different teachers or, guests that we've covered in the past in the sense that, there's minimal online material. There's a ton of stuff on Alan Watts. Please go check it out.
Yeah. And
you're going to love it.
They did a great job recording this on air because he died in 1972 at the age of 58.
And that's nuts.
So he has a lot of material. I know his son is
You said Mark, right? Mark
I believe.
I
hope
can't
don't
remember
get that
either.
wrong. But yeah, his son has a podcast.
Oh,
but
cool.
he's recorded I don't know how many, like 500 hours worth of recordings. It's like,
Oh, really?
oh yeah, it's a lot of it, 400, 500 hours of material.
Wow.
And he released stuff. So it's nice that you think about back in the day when recording, it wasn't as easy as it is now to get a recording device. Like,
Correct.
He would have been giddy if he was around today.
Oh, yeah, he would love it.
Yeah, because
he'd have a full-on podcast going.
Well, he was a major component of how do we translate information without jumping into a jumbo jet and wasting all the. It's all about efficiency, And so right now we live in such an efficient time spending information, and as we start to understand that, it's not the information anymore. It's how we utilize it, what we do with it, coming to a greater understanding. Wow, okay, this is better than this. No, there's an aspect of less than and greater than. But greater doesn't mean it's better or worse. It just is. It just 5 is greater than 3. What does that mean? Until I put a narrative behind it.
Well, that's the thing. Bad and good are on the same spectrum. And so, like, bad and good are just ideas. They're concepts in your head, Like, what's his name? Something bad or good is, only the mind makes of it. I believe that's what Shakespeare said.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, something good or bad, it's like this spectrum of, okay, yeah, you think this is on this end, but, you can change that perspective, and it could be on another end.
Yeah.
And so you kind of see how everything is how you look at it.
Yeah, because it becomes problematic in an individual's life. I know with mine when I try to stay away from what we call bad. When I tried to stay away, I got drawn into it more, so I was lost in it. But when you actually understand these principles, it's like, oh, it's raining out. Oh, okay. It's not that, I still have a bit of preference, but now my preference is softening, and I seem to move lighter. It's like
the preference is no longer the identity.
Preferential.
Well, no, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no.
Like, I only like when it rains.
No.
You can't. It no longer becomes part of your identity. See, we take our preferences and we say, "I am that person,"
and that's a limit. Yeah.
And that's what I am. And then if something happens and it's not one of your preferences, you say, "Now I must be upset."
Yeah.
And then you're being controlled by the outside world or what you're calling your preferences. And this is why you are not your preferences.
Yeah. Well, your preference can either enslave you or they can set you free. So it's how you're looking at your preference.
Your awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this first video is awesome. I picked this one specifically because this one is extremely powerful in the sense of it helped me to understand what this experience is and how we're experiencing it. And let's give it a try.
Let's check it out.
Well, I have a sort of suggestion, and that is this. That before we decide either to save the planet or to destroy it, we pause for a moment of silence. I don't mean that kind of grim silence which one observes when somebody says, such and such a famous person has just died, and we'll observe a moment of silence in his honor. And everybody frowns and thinks very serious thoughts. That's not silence at all. I mean real silence, in which we stop thinking and experience reality as reality is. Because after all, if I talk all the time, I can't hear what anyone else has to say. And if I think all the time, and by that I mean specifically talking to yourself subvocally inside your skull, if I think all the time, I have nothing to think about except thoughts. And so I'm never in touch with the real world. Now, what is the real world? Some people have the theory that the real world is material or physical. I say it's made of kind of a stuff. Other people have the theory that the real world is spiritual or mental. But I want you to point out that both those theories of the world are concepts. They are constructions of words. And the real world is not an idea. It is not words. Reality is
Yeah. I like that. I like
Me
how you
too.
held that little. And so,
That
and-
vibration.
yeah, it's the vibrations. It's the output of frequency, and obviously that's an audible one. We could hear it, feel it. That's really the world that solidifies itself in material is vibration.
How we experience everything
Yeah.
is that wah, 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 wah.
Yeah.
And like I'm glad that you said audible, because what's going on right now is inaudible frequency. And because we don't hear it, because we can't see it, we have been conditioned and told that it does not exist, and that's not the truth. And to have like an easy example of this, take a dog whistle. When we blow a dog whistle, yes, the human ear doesn't hear that, but we all know that that dog whistle is being heard by the dog.
Yeah.
Or like ultraviolet or infrared light. We know that we have a visible light spectrum, but there's this ultraviolet light, and then there's this infrared light, on either end. We know that exists, but we don't see it.
Yeah, and how we started off this clip was, if you just sit there and stare at the world outside of you without thinking. Now, I'm going to clarify. I'm going to try to get to it's almost impossible. But thinking is having a thought and labeling everything within the thought. But if you just have a thought, like you watch a squirrel run up a tree, and here, I just labeled it, so that's thinking. But if I literally just watch and act, so when I see the squirrel and the tree and the mountains behind it, they're all one. So I'm actually experiencing my reality. But once I start to separate the squirrel from the tree and from the mountain, that's thinking. Because now I have a concept of the squirrel. I have a concept of the tree. Can you imagine being the first person that saw a squirrel, didn't even know enough to name it? Or the tree. It's just, the tree does, and Alan watches this analogy all the time. What's the difference? How do you distinguish the difference between a bee and a flower? They're both the same. That's how they exist. But once I separate them and give it a concept, I lose the reality in which I'm in, and I manufacture something, and it doesn't feel right.
And this is what we do with people all day long.
Yeah. So if you could just sit there and observe in a contemplative or thought place, not thinking. Thinking is like, oh, there's Jimmy. There's some. What are they doing? Oh my God.
More experience.
But why is a squirrel climbing up the tree? I'm like, why not?
You're saying experiencing like without labeling it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And when you do that, it's a marvelous, it's an amazing thing. That's the best meditation anyone could ever do. We're trying to meditate to stop that thought, but if you don't actually pick it up, you don't need to close your eyes. You can drive around. It's like, oh, interesting. Look at that.
And that's what he's talking about in this clip too, when he says that like what world? Some think we live in a material world, and some think we live in a spiritual world. To say that either is wrong would be foolish. Both are concepts that very much so are true. I would go a little bit further on what Alan said, and I would say both are true. We live in both. That's what quantum physics has proven to us today. There is no right or wrong. It's both. How are you looking at it? This is where relativity comes into play, and all these different concepts. But when he gets to the gong portion is my favorite, because it encapsulates everything like Frank just said. With the mental, yes, something is happening and it exists, but as soon as we label that or measure that, that's when it becomes separate. And nothing, in fact, around us is separate. It is all connected. The gong, it sends an arc one way and an arc behind it, and this is how we experience time-space reality. Is the arc of the frequency behind you, we would consider our past, and then the arc of the frequency in front of you getting further away, we consider the future. And this is how we say something's past and something's future, when it all in fact is the same thing.
It is, because it's no back around it. It's sephiric.
That's it.
So everything's leaving. It's all.
So to say past and future are separate,
it's simultaneously.
they're not.
now.
Yeah, it's all happening now. And how you can experience this, like he used the gong, that's what life is.